Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Women's Life Stories, we retell those moments, honest as every day, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. At sunrise, Cedar Falls wore its good manners. Sprinklers stitched silver lines across neat lawns, porch flags barely stirred, and the AM station out of KCF 97 hummed a Hank Williams cover through my kitchen window. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and watched the light reach my roses. Each bloom staked like a student lined up for homeroom. Old habits. For 30 years, I herded teenagers as Principal Reed. Now the only thing I supervise is a stubborn bower of climbing tea. I'm 72 and the town still nods when I walk by, as if the bell might ring just because I show up. The clinic on Maple took 15 minutes on foot. Dr. Raj Patel has looked after half this county's knees and allergies long enough to know when someone isn't themselves, and this morning he wasn't. He moved through the checkup with that brisk, comforting rhythm, listening, tapping the blood pressure cuff, a tired squeeze, and told me my labs were excellent, heart steady levels fine. "You are, as the kids say, good to go," he said, smiling. Only his eyes didn't match the smile. While the nurse looked for a fresh bandage, he reached for my itemized bill and stapled a flyer for the clinic's flu drive to it, careful as a man, tucking a Bible into a drawer. At the front desk, I paid with my debit card. The receptionist slid the stapled packet toward me. The staple pinched a corner of something blue, an insurance form, I thought. Outside, I opened it. Behind the bill on the back of the flu flyer were 4 words in Dr. Patel's small, neat hand: "Do not go home." Below that, smaller: "Call me from a safe phone." The ink had bled just enough to look like a printing error. My breath ran short in that sudden private way grief used to catch me after Harold died. I folded the papers and put them in my purse the way a person palms a note in church and waits for the benediction to be over. I chose not to call from the clinic parking lot. The town was too watchful. Cedar Falls sees everything and remembers the rest. I walked the long way back under elms that have roots older than anyone still alive. When I reached my house on Cottonwood, Justin's truck was there, nose crooked in the driveway, as if it had arrived in a hurry and hadn't decided whether to stay. Through the front window, I saw my son, his wife, and my granddaughter gathered around the coffee table. The television was on mute. Paper was spread like a cold lunch manila folder's a legal pad, the glossy envelope my bank uses for monthly statements. They stood when I opened the door, 3 people approximating warmth. "Mom." Justin said, his smile working too hard. "How'd it go?" "Fine," I said, hanging my purse by the hall tree, strong as a mule according to modern medicine. "Wonderful," Carla said. Her voice was honeyed but landed with a thud. She held her hands behind her back, the way students used to when a hall pass had the wrong date on it. Lena, all legs and headphones around her neck, gave me a quick hug that evaporated before I could smell her shampoo. I went to the kitchen and started coffee because coffee is Switzerland. From the doorway, I saw Carla nudge the folders closed with her hip and slip something into her tote. She does this little thing with her mouth when she lies a careful press like she's pinning a note to her own tongue. At the table, Justin asked about the traffic. Lena said Bluebird Diner had a new pie. Ordinary words floated by like leaves on a creek that was moving faster underneath than anyone wanted to admit. We had sandwiches at noon and made a show of not counting slices. When I excused myself, I carried my mug into the front room and admired the family pictures as if they were new. I recognized a form beneath a copy of Midwest Home, a printout from a legal website, the headline peeking like a heel under a hem, "How to petition for temporary guardianship." I didn't touch it. I've learned that in this county, folks like their stories tidy. Fingerprints complicate the plot. The house settled into afternoon the way farmhouses do, lazy, creaking practical. Justin fixed something imaginary under the sink. Carla took a call on the porch and laughed on cue. Lena sat on the step and scrolled. At 3, I watered the roses again because the sun had shifted, and because watering gives a woman an unassailable reason to stand quietly where she can hear. Their voices were metered and careful the way people talk when windows are open. Night found its shape around 11. The last train murmured beyond the river. A raccoon took liberties with the trash lid. The clock in the hall gave its honest count. My bedroom backs the hallway, and old houses carry conversations the way pews carry splinters. I heard them at the dining table, voices, low words, thick with paperwork. "We just need something formal," Justin said. "Temporary guardianship, then power of attorney. We'll keep it in the family. It's what everyone does. Carla Silas can notarize the rest. He's done it 100 times. Lena." "I don't like this." A chair scraped. Carla again, softer but sharper. "You like colleges, don't you?" There was a long domestic silence, the kind that tastes of ice water and swallowed pride. Paper rustled. "Then we list the house," Justin added. "Before the winter." "She won't even notice if we keep her busy," Carla said. "Lena, you can help with that." My granddaughter made a sound I didn't recognize. A little laugh that belonged to someone older than 18 and less certain about her own soul. I lay in the soft dark and pressed my palm against the quilt I pieced after Harold's funeral, thinking of all the ways adults teach children to accept the wrong story because it comes with a tidy ending. The old principal in me cataloged vocabulary, guardianship, notary, power of attorney lists the house. I waited for the floor to stop creaking and for the front door to breathe the way it does when someone tries the knob to make sure it's locked. When the house steadied into sleep, I got up, slid my feet into the old slippers that have followed me through 3 decades of late-night grading and early morning baking, and opened the hall closet. The bulb is dim, it flatters no one. I reached behind the out-of-season coats for the canvas satchel, where I keep the practical things the living never bother to ask. About passports, the deed, the appraisal on Harold's Mustang, the small blue book, where I keep numbers that don't live in cloud or phone. I didn't empty it. I took stock. Pages were in order. A paperclip had migrated. A copy of my bank statement wore a new crease that wasn't mine. Back in my room, I set the clinic packet on the nightstand and tweezed the staple out with my nails. The flyer whispered apart. "Do not go home. Call me from a safe phone." I stared until the words fuzzed, then opened my laptop. I've always told my seniors, date your notes and sign your name. Facts like their hats hung in the same place each day. I opened the document I call my garden diary, because a woman in a small town is entitled to a little theater. I typed what I had heard, each phrase plain as a ruler: temporary guardianship, power of attorney. Silas can notarize, list the house. I saved it to a cloud folder named for roses and to a flash drive that lives in a teacup. I carried my phone into the bathroom, ran the tap, and took a picture of the legal printouts headline from the hall with the zoom framed by the edge of Midwest home. You learn tricks in a school office, how to take a photograph that looks like it isn't one, how to make a copy without touching the thing you're copying. I took 3 photos of nothing much: the corner of Carla's tote, the top of a manila tab where someone had written Silas Ward in block letters, the date circled on the bank envelope, October 28th. I opened a new text to Dr. Patel and deleted it. Then I drafted an email to my own address with a subject line that would not invite curiosity, pie recipe from Bluebird, and attached the photos in my notes. I sent it. Only then did I compose a message to Dr. Patel. No names, no drama. A single sentence that would make sense to the only person in town who had told me the truth twice in one morning. The flu flyer you stapled was very helpful. I'll follow the instructions exactly. I pressed send, locked my screen, and set the phone face down beside the folded note. The house made the small, honest sounds houses make when everyone believes they are alone. I didn't sleep so much as I drifted on the surface of sleep until the birds took the sky back. The hall clock said 5:06 when I swung my legs over the side of the bed. Houses sound different before dawn, plainer, less given to pretending. I moved through mine softly, the way one moves through a church, where the hymnals haven't yet been opened, pulling a cardigan on over my nightgown, trading it for slacks and a pressed blouse, slipping the canvas satchel's strap across my shoulder. The satchel had weight the way a promise does, just enough to keep your posture honest. I didn't leave a note on the kitchen table. I wiped down the counter, rinsed the mug I hadn't used, checked the bolt on the back door, and let myself out the side entrance that sticks in summer. In the half-light, the roses were the color of secrets. Justin's truck slept crooked where it had fallen the night before. I walked past it without looking in and met the street where Cottonwood slides toward the river. Bluebird Diner keeps its lights all night because the highway does. The cook's radio whispered low when I pushed the bell on the glass door. The place smelled like coffee and butter burning on purpose. "Morning, Principal Reed," Ruth said. She still calls me that. "You're early or late, can't tell which." "Could I borrow your office phone?" I asked. "The landline." She lifted the counter gate. "Use mine right here, sugar. It's quieter than the office anyway." I dialed the clinic and asked for Dr. Patel by his first name, because the receptionist is too kind to say no to a person who sounds like she knows where she belongs. He picked up on the second ring. "Evelyn," he said, as if we were halfway through a conversation. "Are you safe?" "I am not at home," I said. "I read your handwriting." He took a breath I could hear. "They were in my office yesterday. Your son and daughter-in-law. They asked for a letter about your memory, about your capacity to make medical decisions. I told them no and that you were fine. They pressed. I asked them to leave. I'm concerned they'll shop around." "That tracks," I said. "There are times when a principal's tone fits better than a widow's." "Do one thing for me," he said. "Reduce your exposure. No decisions by phone. In person only. If anyone calls pretending to be from my office or the bank, hang up and call back on a number you look up yourself." "I can do that," I said. "Thank you for telling the truth." "Thank you for believing it." He paused. "And Evelyn, if you need a quiet place for a few hours, my sister's a librarian. The back room at the county library is always empty this early." "I'll keep that in mind," I said, and we both understood what that meant without saying it. I bought Ruth's smallest thermos of coffee and left $2 more than the price because Bluebird is its own kind of church. The bank on Broad doesn't open until 8, but the ATM foyer does, and there are chairs if you look as though you belong to the building. I sat by the fake ficus and watched the street come into itself. At 8:03, the blinds lifted and the motion sensor turned the hallway into an aisle. Cammie, the teller with the blunt cut and the better smile, unlocked the glass. "Mrs. Reed," she said, "you're my favorite first customer." "I like setting the tone," I said, and slid her my ID. "I need to add some safeguards to my accounts. No phone authorizations, please, and remove online transfers except to the 3 places I'll list. Alerts on withdrawals over $50. Paper statements only picked up in person." She nodded in a way that said I wasn't the first woman to ask for the world to slow down enough to put both hands on it. I can do all that she said. And I can add a note, in-person identification required for any changes. The managerial countersign. She looked at the screen, then at me. "Do you still want the trusted contact listed as your son?" "Please remove that field," I said. "If the system requires a name, use Dr. Raj Patel. He won't make decisions. He'll only take a phone call if something seems off." "We can do no decisions, emergency contact for fraud only," she said, fingers moving. "That keeps the auditors from fussing." "Good," I said, "and I'd like to withdraw some cash." "How much feels right?" she asked, the way a good hairdresser asks how much to trim. "A practical amount," I said, "enough to be inconvenient for a thief, but convenient for a cab." She counted out crisp bills in modest stacks. While she did, she kept her voice low. "I can't discuss clients," she said, "but sometimes we get inquiries about guardianship and access. Policy is we send them to the court clerk. If anyone comes in with paperwork, the manager calls me and we call you before we do anything. That's the rule now." "That's a good rule," I said. Thank you for following it. She tucked the receipt into an envelope and slid it over with both hands, which is a tenderness most people haven't learned can be given without cost. You let me know if you need a safe deposit box, she said. We have smaller ones now, cheaper. I'll think on it, I said, which in our county is stronger than a yes. The Riverside Inn sits on the river bend where the old mill used to breathe. The carpet in the lobby has seen every wedding party in the last 20 years. The clerk has seen more. 1 bed high floor if you have it, I said, and a room that doesn't hear the ice machine. We have a queen with a view of the water tower, she said. I'm a fan of the water tower. Calms me down when I count keys. She slid the check-in folio across. I wrote my name as if penmanship still counted for something, took the key card and rode the elevator up past the floors that smell like chlorine and hope. In the room, I drew the curtains to find the town's dull silver spine and put the satchel on the desk as if it were taking attendance. I washed my face with a hotel washcloth that believed in second chances and changed into the other blouse I'd folded. Then I picked up the phone and called a number I had saved in my blue book a long time ago under C, because sometimes people become who their letters suggest. Collins Avery. He answered with a tone that had opinions and a coffee stain in it. Collins. This is Evelyn Reed, I said. I have a matter that involves family and paperwork that doesn't smell like it should. That's oddly specific, he said, and I could hear his grin. Are you at home? No. Good, he said, and the paper sound of a calendar turned. I can meet you at 11 at my office, the brick one by the courthouse with the brass mailbox that dented in '09. Bring whatever you have and whatever you remember. I have both, I said. The courthouse square carried its usual noon weather lawyers, holding their jackets by 2 fingers. Farmers folding receipts into fifths, a teenager skateboarding as if the county had built granite purely for that purpose. Collins's office had a hand-lettered sign that said, "Ring bells Moody." I rang. He arrived in shirt sleeves, tied loose, eyes awake in a way that meant he'd already used the morning for more than coffee. "Ms. Reed," he said, pumping my hand with exactly one confident shake. "Let's give your matter a file and a chair." His conference table was tidy except for a ceramic dish, shaped like the state, with paper clips in the counties no one talks about. I placed my satchel on the table and took out what I'd brought: copies of my deeds, the list of account numbers in my own block letters, the photos from last night, my typed notes. He didn't interrupt as I told him what had changed in my kitchen: voices, phrases, names. When I finished, he set his pen down, lined it with the legal pad's edge, and met my eye with something that had the same shape as respect. "Okay," he said, "I've seen versions of this. Not every day. It's good you're here now." He clicked his intercom. "Maggie, can you come in?" A woman about my age stepped in, carrying the air of someone who has never lost a paper in her life. "We need a standing letter to Mrs. Reed's bank regarding in-person changes only, and we'll file an affidavit about her capacity. No conclusions, just timeline and documentation. Also run a public records check on a notary named Silas Ward. See what we can see without asking anyone to wink." "On it," she said. Collins turned back to me. "There's a gentleman I like for facts. Former deputy knows where the copy machines are in this town. If you're comfortable, I'll ask him to look at pawnshop logs for the last month and whether any notary has been unusually sociable." "I am comfortable," I said. "Facts are welcome." The gentleman arrived half an hour later, clean jaw, kind eyes, a shirt that had been pressed by a person who didn't rush. "Nate Hollis," he said, and his handshake said, "I have kept things from falling off trucks." Collins closed the door and let him catch up. I retold the parts that needed telling. Nate wrote without looking at his hand. "Cashtown's manager eats lunch at 11:30 sharp," he said. "He'll talk if you ask him about fishing first." He looked at me. "Do you mind if I ask what you're most worried about today?" "People who love me using words. I taught them to write me out of my own name," I said. "And the speed at which a rumor becomes a fact on paper." He nodded as if I'd given him a weather report he could plan harvest around. "That's useful," he said. "I'll be back this afternoon." He was. He stood in Collins's doorway with a folder whose corners had been persuaded. Cashtown has a ticket from last week, he said, open and spare. Woman matching Carla's description sold a white gold bracelet with 3 small emeralds. Paid poor. Name on the ticket is C. Reed with an E on the end. Clerk says she talked fast. He looked at me. Does that sound like a piece you know? It does, I said. My mother wore it when the weather turned warm. Nate set another sheet down, and the notary ward signs, a lot of titles at Office World, and a handful of family agreements scribbled at kitchen tables. He rents a mailbox at the UPS store. Nothing illegal in the ink, but the volume's interesting for a town this small. Maggie tapped a printed page. He notarized 3 power of attorney forms last month. 2 were later rescinded by the clerk when people cried foul. Could be sloppiness, could be something else. We'll keep an eye. Collins leaned back, hands tented under his chin, not in a television way, but in the way of a man thinking which road bends less. All right, he said softly. We'll make a clean record. We have time on our side when the facts behave. I sat up straighter. A strange calm had blown in, the kind that comes when a teacher shuts a door and the hum outside stops mattering. I gathered my papers, slid them back into the satchel, and stood. Thank you, I said to each of them, looking long enough that gratitude landed where it needed to land. Outside the square had filled with noon as if nothing inside any office had ever altered a life. I walked to the river along the brick path the scout troop installed and watched the water go where rivers go, carrying what they carry without announcing it. Back at the Riverside Inn, the clerk handed me an envelope someone had slid under the office door, Maggie's handwriting on the front, a copy of the bank letter inside with a green stamp at the bottom. I put it in the safe in the closet and left the door ajar. I made tea in the room and ate the apple from the reception bowl because I hadn't thought to be hungry. When the kettle clicked, I poured and watched the steam lift and vanish against the window. My phone lay face down where I'd put it. The town's water tower wore the afternoon like a crown it hadn't asked for. I opened my blue book and underlined a name that had appeared twice today in other people's mouths, then closed the cover and tucked the pencil into the spiral. The way I have done since I learned a list can be both a map and a memory. Morning slid down the water tower like a stripe of tin. I woke to the Riverside Inn's polite hush, the ice machine distant, the hallway carpet swallowing footsteps, and brewing in-room coffee until it tasted more like itself. On the desk lay Colin's letter to the bank with its green stamp, my blue book, and the clinic flyer whose staple still grinned in the corner. I dressed, set the key card in my pocket where I'd feel it when I reached for change, and called a number from a real estate ad tucked in last week's paper. Hearth and Home Realty, a woman said, vowels, friendly consonants, on time. This is Evelyn Reed, I said. I'd like to look at a place with good bones and fewer stairs than my knees deserve. She laughed once. I'm Marla Tipton. I have a craftsman on Sycamore with a porch that could mend a person. Can you do 10 to 10? I can do 10. The office lived on the square between the jeweler and the barber, and you could tell which door was which by the shine on the knobs. Marla had a haircut that said she trusted one person with scissors and a blazer the color of a robin's egg. She shook my hand like we'd both arrived on purpose. You're Principal Reed, she said. My youngest still quotes your attendance speeches when he's late for anything. Tell him I still mean it, I said. We drove out to Sycamore with the windows down. The porch did in fact look like a place a person could sit with a glass of tea and forget the distance between decisions. Inside heart pine floors, a kitchen that hadn't yet been bullied by granite light that took its time crossing a room. I moved through it listening for the telltale wheeze old houses make when they've been asked to keep a secret too long. This one breathed fine. Take your time, Marla said, stepping onto the porch to let me walk alone. I was washing my hands at the hall sink when her phone buzzed. I need to lock up and swing back by the office for a minute, she said, apologetic. Walk with me. At Hearth and Home, the lobby smelled faintly of copier toner and lemon oil. A second agent in a navy sheath stood at the front desk, head bent toward a couple I knew by the shape of their backs before they turned. Mom, Justin said, straightening like a boy who had been caught holding a cigarette. Carla put on the smile she keeps in her purse with her lip balm. The agent's name tag read C. Pelham, and under it in tiny script, broker. "We're here about an appraisal," Carla said brightly, looking at Pelham. Me. "For my mother-in-law's property on Cottonwood. She's been having some memory troubles and we're trying to, plan responsibly." Pelham glanced from Carla to me to Marla as if we'd arranged theater. "We can begin a market analysis," she said, professional to the syllable. "I'll just need to make a copy of your power of attorney for our file." Carla's smile faltered by a millimeter. "The paperwork is coming together," she said. "The doctor agrees it would be best." "I'm available for questions," I said, plain as a stop sign. "I have not granted power of attorney to anyone." Pelham's eyebrows did the smallest mathematics. She set a pen on the counter like a conductor laying down a baton. "In that case, we'll wait until the authorizing documents exist," she said to Carla, voice soft but not movable. Justin's jaw flexed, the same toe tap of temper he had at 12, when a ref called a foul he didn't like. "Mom, we're just trying to help," he said as if volume could decide truth. "Help is a verb best conjugated with consent," I said, and Marla cleared her throat to keep from smiling. "Would you excuse me for one moment?" I asked the room, then stepped 3 paces aside and called Collins. He picked up at the first ring. "Where?" "Hearth and Home lobby," I said. "Broker present. My family's requesting an appraisal based on a condition I do not have." "Stay put," he said. "Maggie's 2 blocks away with a notary who owes her a pie." Maggie arrived like a breeze that knows which papers to lift. With her came a woman in a cardigan with a notary's stamp in a zip case. Collins followed half a minute later, tie straight, this time expression even. "Good morning," he said to the room at large. "We're here to make the record clear." He nodded to the notary. "Would you witness Ms. Reed's statement?" We stood at the counter. I read from the page Maggie set down in her tidy font. "Evelyn May Reed of sound mind have not granted power of attorney or guardianship to any party. Any representation to the contrary is false." I signed. The notary stamped with a satisfying thunk, the ink clean, the seal circular and exact. Pelham made a copy for her file without being asked. Collins turned to Justin and Carla, his voice polite enough to be heard in church. "If you intend to handle Mrs. Reed's affairs, please produce the order of the court or the signed instrument granting you authority." Carla's fingers worried the strap of her bag. "We're in the process," she said, the phrase people use when a bridge is not just out but imaginary. "Until that process results in something signed by someone competent to sign it. Collins said you will not represent to any third party that you act for Mrs. Reed. Ms. Pelham, thank you for your caution." Pelham inclined her head. "Hearth and Home requires proper documentation," she said. "We protect our clients and ourselves." A silence ran across the lobby like a thin crack in winter ice. Justin looked at me the way sons look at mothers when their story doesn't land. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. "I prefer things not easy but correct," I said. "There is a difference." Marla touched my elbow. "Let's step outside for a minute," she murmured, and we did. On the square, the courthouse clock did its honest work. A woman from the quilt shop across the street waved and mouthed, "Everything okay?" I lifted my palm, the universal sign for enough for now. News in Cedar Falls moves by the old channels, barber chairs, church pews, the farmer's market, and KCF 97. I walked the market after the meeting to remember the parts of town not built on paper tomatoes, lined like red punctuation, a boy selling eggs out of a carton he decorated with a blue marker, a fiddler bowing something with one toe lifted for rhythm. People greeted me with the plain softness they reserve for bereavements and birthdays. 2 different vendors asked whether I'd be reading at the library luncheon next month, which told me what rumor was in season and how it ripened. Near the honey stall, Millie Garner from KCF 97 waved me down with a microphone foam she'd covered in a knit cozy to keep the wind off. "Principal Reed," she said, as if I'd walked into her morning show on cue, "we're live on Neighbor to Neighbor, and we've been talking about elder paperwork. Folks have questions." Would you care to share a general reminder from a person who has seen a lot of forms? I weighed the square of the mark at my voice and nodded once. She held the mic just close enough. Good morning, Cedar Falls, I said, and kept my eyes on Millie so they'd stay off everyone else. Here's a simple truth. If someone claims the legal right to make your decisions, ask to see the papers. If you did not sign those papers on a good day with a witness who writes their name straight and a notary who stamps in a circle, that person is mistaken. I have not signed such papers. If you hear otherwise, consider the source and ask me. Millie gave me the thumbs up she gives high school bands when they hit the key change. That's clear enough to knit, she said to the radio and then into my ear off mic. You need an hour for call-ins. You let me know. Back at Collins's office, Nate waited with a folder and the stance of a man who stands for a living. I spent the morning with Office World, the UPS store, and 2 clerks who like coffee, he said. Our notary, Silas Ward, is more active than a notary ought to be. He notarized a kitchen table care agreement yesterday. No attorney present, signature looks rehearsed. He also rented a private mailbox 3 weeks ago under SW Services. Paper smells like someone's making a business out of family. Maggie slid a printout across to me. 2 rescinded power of attorneys in the last month with his seal, she said. Clerks revoked them after complaints. Collins's jaw worked once, not in anger, more like a man testing a tooth. We'll memorialize today's incident at Hearth and Home, he said, and we'll quietly let the clerk know there's chatter. My phone lit with a number I keep in my book under Torres Alma Sheriff. I stepped into the hall. Sheriff. Ms. Reed, she said, the voice of a woman who knows the cost of a uniform. I caught a piece of you on the radio. Sounded tidy. I'm calling because a bulletin crossed my desk this morning. The State Department of Justice has a task force surfacing notary fraud, and a familiar name sits in their notes. We're sharing referrals. Silas Ward, I said. That would be the name, she said. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you we'll receive anything you file, and we'll log it in ink. If anyone waves papers at you, call my office. I'll send a deputy to make a photocopy before anyone blinks. Thank you, I said. One more thing, she added, voice even. If people start poking at you in public, step into a store and ask for the manager. Nobody wants a scene on the square. I prefer my scenes indoors, I said, and she snorted almost a laugh. I returned to the conference room. Collins had typed up a memo of what Pelham had said, and what she had not, what Justin had claimed, and what he had not produced. He slid it over for my signature. I read each line and signed, in the space Maggie had drawn with a mechanical pencil. On my way back to the inn, I stopped at the post office and bought a sheet of stamps with the dogwood on them. The clerk said New Orleans were pretty, but these feel like home, and I agreed. In the room, I put the signed memo, the notary copy, and Millie's business card into the safe and left it open while I arranged them, then clicked it shut with my hand flat on the door so the latch would seat right. I poured water into the kettle and set it on the electric coil until it shivered. The town moved outside the window in its small, steady ways, trucks downstream toward the feed store, a cyclist cutting the square at an angle, a line at the bank that would rise and fall before the teller's lunch. I opened my blue book and wrote 3 names on a fresh page, each in its own line with a little space under it for dates. Then I capped the pen, set it square with the edge of the desk, and let the steam from the cup fog the view until the water tower softened and the town looked for a moment like a place drawn in chalk. The afternoon thinned to a pale coin and then to nickel gray. I packed the satchel the way I used to pack end-of-year files paper in order copies, where copies belong, a sweater that remembers the shape of my shoulders. I took the blue book, the clinic flyer, the bank letter, and the small New Testament with a cracked spine that had traveled from my mother's purse to mine. The Riverside clerk slid a map across the counter and circled the turnoff for Lake Hemlock as if I hadn't taken that road 100 times in a life that kept its own mileage. The cabin sits back from the water under white pines that speak even when wind forgets them. Inside, the air held cedar and dust and the square old smell of a room that trusts you to behave. I opened windows until the screens chimed with insects and put the kettle on the tiny stove. the Mustang hole in the muffler, and all fit the clearing like a comma in a sentence that still had something to say. I set the New Testament on the table, turned to the ribbon, and slid a folded paper into the back cover where the binding hides a seam. Some things live better when they live once removed. I called Lena from the porch where the railing still needs sanding. When she answered, music bled through as if she'd lifted one ear cup. "I'm at the lake," I said. "The key is in the terracotta pot by the steps. If you want a place to breathe that isn't your mother's kitchen, there's tea." She didn't answer right away. "I can be there in 20, she said at last. The road delivered her in 16 gravel, tossing small arguments under her tires. She stepped from the car without the bravado she wears in photographs. She had my daughter's wrists, my son's eyes, and a new shadow set just under the skin. She took the steps slow. I poured tea into mugs that chipped in the same place. "It smells like old summer," she said, sitting at the table with the posture of a girl who has been told to sit up her whole life and just now remembered to comply. "Sit however you need to sit," I said, and she let her shoulders drop. We didn't look at each other at first. We watched steam rise. We listened to the lake rub shore the way a person rubs a thumb over a worry stone. When she spoke, her voice had the scrape of a throat used to keeping words back. "Mom said you were slipping," she said. "She said we needed to help before you hurt yourself." "And what did you think?" I asked. "I thought that didn't sound like you," she said. But they had printouts, and Dad looked like a man who'd been told bad news twice in one day. They said doctors had to agree. They asked for a letter, I said. My doctor declined. Lena picked the paper sleeve around her cup. "They told me to be around more, to notice if you left the stove on, to write things down." She swallowed. "Gran, I don't want to be part of..." She stopped. "You've always been good at noticing," I said. "You noticed in the lobby yesterday that truth gets shy when rooms fill up." Her mouth lifted, then steadied. "I'm in trouble," she said, and the last word was so light I had to lean toward it. "I'm late. 2 months. He's older and married, and I was stupid." She closed her eyes like she could stop time by refusing to look at it. "Mom said college will fix it if we just get through this year. Dad said I should keep my head down. Then last night they fought about money, and he said if anyone asked, I'd sold your bracelet, that I'm the one with a reason. He said that plays better." The lake gave back a little sound like a fish turning over. I rested my hand on the table between us. "You recorded them," I said, not a question. "I started after you left," she said. "I kept thinking if I had proof I'd be less crazy. There are texts. There's a picture of the pawn ticket. There's a voice memo with Mom saying a name Silas like it was a password." "Thank you for bringing your ears," I said. "Do you have those with you?" She slid her phone across. The screen's background was the old dog at the river from a summer when everything looked flatter and kinder. She opened a folder titled Physics, which is an old trick and a good one, and there they were. Timestamped short files, a photograph of handwriting that tried to look tougher than it was. "Lena," I said, "would you rather hand these to me or to my attorney? He has a woman in the office who treats paper the way I treat roses." She held the phone in both hands for a count of 3, then pushed it toward me until her fingernails went pale. "To him," she said. "I don't want to mess it up." We drove back toward town with the windows down because the old car refuses other methods. At Collins's office, Maggie met us at the door with the crisp efficiency of a nurse on a CPR day. She guided us to the smaller conference room and set a glass of water in front of Lena and a pad of paper in front of herself. Colin sat across from us, tie already loosened hair doing the little bend it does when he's read too much in a morning. Lena spoke with the precision of a student reading a lab procedure so she won't spill the acid. Names, dates, who said what and when, what was on the table, what the room smelled like curry on Tuesday, bleach on Thursday. Maggie's pencil kept time. When Lena faltered, Collins didn't fill space. He let quiet make room for the next true thing. When they had enough to sort, Collins called down the hall. A woman with a badge that read Marisol Vega Victim Witness stepped in with a folder and a calm that didn't put on a performance. I'm with the county attorney's office, she said to Lena, not to the room. If anyone pressures you because you told the truth, you tell me, and I'll take that pressure away long enough for you to breathe. Lena nodded, eyes on the folder. I don't want to hurt anybody, she said. You're not, Marisol said, simple as a weather report. Harm already happened. You're describing it. Maggie airdropped the files, made hard copies, and logged an inventory. I initialed where she had drawn neat lines. Lena printed her name on a chain of forms that didn't ask more than they needed, and then Marisol walked her through the words, support services, like they meant something besides paperwork. By late afternoon, the courthouse had put on its 5 o'clock face, the one it wears when the echo helps you hear your shoes. Nate leaned into Collins's doorway with a look that said he'd been to 3 places that didn't all smell good. Silas Ward just got himself collected, he said. State DOJ task force rolled in 2 Tahoes, and the county gave them a guest room. They walked him out of office world with a box. Torres kept the sidewalk clear. Collins's eyebrow rose a notch. Nate laid 2 photocopies on the table, and this he said. Clerk's office file on a mortgage recorded 2 Fridays ago, lien against the Cottonwood House lender out-of-state application list, shows a co-owner named Carla Reed with an E again. Signature doesn't match yours. Recorded by a notary whose seal number belongs to Mr. Ward. I let breath go the way you let a stitch go when you realize the row will have to be redone. Maggie had already printed a form for contesting the record and another for a request to hold filings pending review. She set a sticky flag where my name needed to go. The pen felt heavier than a pen. We signed, Maggie copied, Collins carried the originals himself to the clerk, who takes them from him without eye roll and with a stamp that doesn't smudge. When he returned, he closed the door with the back of his shoe and leaned against it for a moment like a man who has finally found the stud in a wall. All right, he said, voice level. We have a clean chain on the recordings. We have a notary in custody. We have a contested mortgage with a seal that has seen better days. We have a witness advocate who knows her roads. Lena stood, her hands shook, and then discovered the trick of being still. Can I? She began, then stopped. I'd like to stay with Gran for a few nights, she said, and looked at me, not at anyone else. Yes, I said. Bring what you need. If you have nowhere to put what you need, we will make a place. On the way out, Collins handed me a manila envelope with my name on the tab in Maggie's block letters. Copies, he said. Keep them where you keep what you keep. Back at the cabin, evening folded itself along the lake in strips of pewter and blue. We ate sandwiches on plates that didn't match and put our shoes under the same chair. Lena fell asleep on the old sofa with a book open face down on her stomach, as if story could pin a person to a better page if they let it. I sat at the table and pulled a sheet of notebook paper from the blue book's pocket. On the top line, I wrote to Cedar Falls, then set down the facts a town needs, in an order a town prefers my full name, my address, that I am well and under my own hand, that I have not given away the right to sign for myself, that rumors make poor receipts. I wrote the date. I signed the bottom. I folded it once. The pines traded secrets above the roof. The kettle rattled on the ring until it settled. I slid the folded paper into an envelope and pressed the flap shut with the flat of my hand until it held. The courthouse smelled like old varnish and paper cut straight. Lena and I climbed the stone steps with the steady caution people use when the day might change its name before lunch. Marisol met us outside the security arch and handed Lena a plain blue lanyard with witness in block letters. If you need a break, tap my sleeve, she said. Collins joined us with a folder so thin it made me trust it. Maggie walked beside him carrying a box that looked heavier than it was. Paper, when it has listened to a story long enough, puts on weight. Inside the gallery filled with a cross-section of Cedar Falls men in seed caps. Pelham from Hearth and Home, Ruth from Bluebird in her church cardigan, Cammie from the bank with her hair pinned back like Tess Day. Sheriff Torres took a bench under the clock and folded her hands. Dr. Patel slid into the last row and didn't wave. The judge wore the expression of a man who has sorted other people's closets for a long time. The bailiff called the case. The county attorney, a compact woman with a voice that didn't waste verbs, stood and read the charges: attempted exploitation of an elder false instrument, filing fraudulent mortgage conspiracy. Defense counsel answered for Justin and Carla. Their chairs made the small noise chairs make when people try not to scrape. The state called C. Pelham. She testified about the morning at Hearth and Home, the approach, the claim of memory trouble, the request for an appraisal, her request for power of attorney, my denial. Collins had memorialized every syllable. The county attorney walked Pelham through it without embroidery. The defense tried to suggest she misheard. Pelham's eyebrow rose the same way it had in her office, and the jury wrote something down. Cammie took the stand next. She explained bank safeguards and the note on my file in person, only no telephone changes. Last Thursday, she said Mr. Reed asked general questions about access if a guardianship petition were filed. I gave policy. He did not present an order. She kept her eyes on the attorney, not on Justin. The jury wrote again. Nate testified about the pawn ticket, the bracelet, the amount paid, the clerk's description, the name C. Reed. He laid a copy of the receipt flat so the jurors could see the misspelling. He described Ward's notary pattern titles at Office World kitchen table agreements, a rented mailbox under SW Services, and handed up the 2 rescissions from the clerk's office. The defense asked if people ever make innocent mistakes with names. Often, Nate said. They don't usually make money on them. A state investigator took the stand to explain Ward's arrest, a search warrant, a box of notary journals, seals, template forms for power of attorney, and the seal number that matched the mortgage recorded against the Cottonwood house. The courtroom quieted into the kind of listening that collects in rafters. The investigator held up a photocopy of the mortgage and pointed to the notary seal, then to Ward's journal entry date time, purported signers, his shaky loop signature. The county attorney called Maggie. She authenticated the memo Collins drafted after Hearth and Home, my notarized statement that I had not granted authority to anyone in the chain of custody for photographs and notes. I'd taken the Midwest Home edge, the bank envelope with October 28th, circled the Zoom of how to petition for temporary guardianship, peeking under a magazine. Maggie spoke like a person who irons. The jury looked relieved to have something that didn't shift when touched. Then Lena. Marisol walked her to the stand as if the space between table and witness box could trip a person who'd never stumbled. Lena took the oath in a voice that began thin and found its ribs by the second sentence. She told them what she had heard at our dining table: temporary guardianship, power of attorney. Silas can notarize, list the house. She described the fight at home later, the plan to let blame fall on a teenager, with a reason if questions came. The county attorney played 3 short recordings. The sound filled the room true as a hammer. On cross, the defense tried to paint her as a girl bargaining for favor. Has your grandmother promised you money to testify? The defense asked. No, Lena said. She promised me the truth would be written down. The defense asked who the father was. The judge sustained an objection before the question finished being itself. The jurors wrote more. I took the stand last for the state's case. The county attorney's questions were crisp, the kind you can answer with a fact without stepping on your own foot. I explained my age, my work, my checkup. Dr. Patel's note on the clinic flyer, my decision to document not conclusions, just dates and words. I described hearing the phrases through the open window. The defense asked whether I might have misheard. Old houses carry sound, I said. I've lived in mine longer than either defendant has lived anywhere. Closing arguments came and went like weather fronts. The county attorney stacked the papers in the order a clerk would prefer and pointed to the places where ink and intent held hands. The defense talked about misunderstanding and family worry. The judge charged the jury. 12 people left the room and all the breath went with them. They returned in less time than it takes a pie to cool. The foreman stood. On each count, he said one word the same way every time. The judge thanked the jury and set the matter of sentencing for that afternoon. People filed out to the square where rumor could stretch her legs. Lena sat very still, her hands palmed down on the table, as if touching wood might steady it. In the afternoon, the judge read numbers and conditions. Justin, a term of years in the state system on conspiracy and fraud counts, restitution to be determined, no contact order, financial monitoring on release. Carla, a term of years for filing a false instrument and participating in the scheme, restitution, no contact prohibition on acting as agent or fiduciary for anyone not herself. Ward would be handled separately in the state's larger case. The fraudulent mortgage was voided on the record. The clerk entered the order while we were still standing. After the square filled with the ordinary, trucks idled at the light. The barber flipped his sign. Ruth pressed a paper cup of lemonade into my hand without comment. Marisol hugged Lena with the flat-palmed care of a person who knows exactly where bruises hide, and then left to walk someone else down a different hallway. We stepped onto Sycamore in the later light and stood on the porch Marla had shown me. The boards were warm, the rail smooth, where someone had sanded this spring. Lena leaned against the post and opened the mail, 2 envelopes from the school, one from the county library and the Cedar Falls Gazette, with a letter on the opinion page titled, "To Cedar Falls." It was mine in print now, the sentences I had written at the lake exactly as they'd been set down, my name, my address, that I was well and under my own hand, that I had not given away the right to sign, that rumors make poor receipts. The font made the words square. Sheriff Torres turned up the walk carrying a manila envelope not official. "Clerk's certified copies," she said, "for your safe." She tipped her chin at the porch. "You keeping this place?" "I am," I said. "Good," she said, and tapped the rail once with her knuckle. "See you around, Ms. Reed." She nodded to Lena like an adult meeting an adult and left. Inside, the rooms held their own breath. We set the certified copies in the safe with the other papers made heavy by being believed. I opened a window and let the evening in. The water tower on the skyline took the sun and softened it. On the radio, KCF 97 played a song from a decade I'd taught through. The announcer's laugh cracked on a consonant and kept going. I poured lemonade into 2 jelly jars and carried them to the porch. Lena pulled her chair close enough for our knees to know where they were. The street settled. Somewhere a dog decided enough squirrels had been warned for one day. A cyclist ghosted by in the last stripe of orange. We sat without filling the quiet and watched the town keep being itself. The porch light clicked on when the dusk found it. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.